Greetings, friends. My name is Jessa McLean, and I'm here to provide you with some blueprints of disruption. This weekly podcast is dedicated to amplifying the work of activists, examining power structures, and sharing the success stories from the grassroots. Through these discussions, we hope to provide folks with the tools and the inspiration they need to start to dismantle capitalism, decolonize our spaces, and bring about the political revolution we know we need. We've labeled this episode Autistic Resistance, the Foundations. Till next time, keep disrupting. It's an in-depth discussion with Lulu Larcenciel, an autistic and disabled advocate and academic. That really doesn't sum up all the things that Lulu does. You're going to hear some sorely needed myth-busting. It's going to be a critical look at so-called progressive policies that are negatively impacting disabled people. Lulu is going to help us all get out of the past in terms of what we think we know autistic and neurodivergent people need to thrive. It really is incredible what we can learn if we just listen. Welcome to Blueprints of Disruption, Lulu. I am so happy to have you on the show. You've been a wealth of knowledge for me for a few years now, and so I'm excited to share your voice with other people. Can you go ahead and please introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. So my name is Lulu Larcenciel. I'm she, her. I am an autistic and disabled advocate, activist, and academic in currently living in St. Catharines at Brock University, studying young autistic people's well-being. And I have been a sort of political and social justice volunteer and advocate and member for quite some time. Also being queer, I also have a lot of sort of strange and exciting experiences from queer advocacy, although most of those are not very novel and have been on many podcasts before, so probably I'll focus more on the disability angle, which I feel like really hasn't been represented that well in the past.
Thank you, Lulu. I mean, that's definitely been my experience organizing on the left. I've never seen a group, a so-called equity-seeking group, marginalized more than the disabled community. It's shocking to see on the left.
I would say, yeah, it's not so much of like a comparative thing either, right? And it's, I mean, I think, being queer, being a woman, all of the groups that I am a part of have been horribly, prejudiced and against and oppressed. But I think it's a kind of hypocrisy where the same behavior or similar behavior on the part of politicians towards disabled people that they absolutely revile in other politicians when those politicians do that to women or whatever other group. And I do think that is quite an interesting phenomenon. But I'm not big on the comparisons because then you can sometimes get into sort of conflating different kinds of problems. Black autistic people face mountains, exponentially more violence than white autistic people, for example. And even within our party, within various political structures, within academic institutions, even within, most aspects of society, it, again, and I'm sure you talk about intersectionality in, every interview you have, I'm sure. And that's important because, it is 100% true that disabled people are marginalized and pushed aside in left circles in a way that is just completely absurd. And it's contradictory to everything that those left circles say that they're standing for and say that they're fighting for. And then to turn around and sort of do the opposite to the disabled folks in their midst. It is startling how common it is. Absolutely.
I understand you're kind of checking me there on the comparison. I do appreciate that because you're 100% right. It's just, I expect better, when you see, abled people chairing the disabled committee. You wouldn't see that otherwise. So
yeah, it is very interesting. I can't imagine an organization which is committed to social justice and anti-oppression, hiring a man to be the women's coordinator, but you will find someone who's not disabled as an accessibility coordinator. And I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand how that's not an actual expert on disability, an actual disabled person being put in that role, but just a non-disabled person who's getting that tacked on to their other job, as though it's just, some other task, as though it's not a critical tool to ensure that, a fifth of the population has access to your organization.
Yeah, you frame it as like a dismissal of its importance. It's true. I thought of the paternalism that goes into that, thinking that, even if they thought it was critical, it could not be left to disabled folks to do.
There are interesting conversations that go on about, whether disabled people are capable. And this is something which is used as an excuse across systems, right? This is an excuse that's used to deny people accommodations if you already seem like you're capable of doing something, even if you're disabled and you're saying, hey, I need this accommodation. It's used to kind of mock people. It's used to kind of try and drag someone down when they ask for something and say, oh, well, if you can't do this without it, and really try to make you feel bad about it. And it's, unfortunately, it really does lead people to these bizarre and incredibly cruel opinions and suggestions that disabled folks aren't capable of moderating our own spaces and deciding what accessibility is necessary. That has to go through non-disabled gatekeepers in every organization I've ever been part of, which is horrifying. Just disturbing.
You listed a bunch of A's when you introduced yourself. You're an academic, you're an advocate, you're an activist, but you're autistic. If you don't mind, I would like to focus on that because, and the comment that you made earlier about capacity and misconceptions. So you seemingly, you listed a whole bunch of things that you do. I know you left off a lot of stuff because we're going to have to talk about the ND and NDP later. And so you do a lot. You're breaking misconceptions about people with autism right there.
Autistic people.
Autistic people. Thank you. What other misconceptions are people holding, especially on the left? Comrades that, will be listening about autistic people and particularly their ability to advocate.
Yeah. So this is an interesting, and especially that last sort of part of the question about advocating, because I'm autistic. I'm a queer autistic who was and I'm a cis woman, and among autistic people, women are horrifically underdiagnosed, and this has led to one huge misconception, which is a lot of people still believe. This is also true on the left. I was just checking in my brain. A lot of people believe that autism is a boys thing. This is a stereotype which has been true for quite some time across cultures. They have this stereotype across, and this is partially due to some really flawed research that came out quite early on, which called autism a male brain disorder. Which, yeah, it was just silly. Quite frankly, it was just a really silly theory. It's been misproven a number of times. But this myth persists. And the reason that I use that one first is just because it's a really easy, obvious myth. It's very clearly a piece of misinformation that there are more autistic boys than girls. But this is something people believe wholeheartedly. And, research over the last 10 years all contradicts that and says that girls have been wildly underdiagnosed and wildly underrecognized as autistic. Girls have gone without accommodations, without recognition, and they've ended up in severe mental distress. They've ended up with depression. They've ended up suicidal. Many of them are no longer with us. A horrifying study was recently revealed right here in Ontario from 2010 to 2016. Autistic people were 6 times more likely to die than non-autistic people with other matching demographics. That mortality rate doesn't come out of thin air. And a lot of it is due to misconceptions that lead to autistic people going unrecognized, unaccommodated. And the reason that I really focus on that is that the way people conceptualize autism right now is based on all of these different myths. And they're sort of piecing these different stereotypes and myths and things they've seen in sensationalized movies and things they've heard from, their neighbor's brother's got a kid who's autistic, and so they know from hearing about that. And that doesn't actually result in knowledge, right? That doesn't actually result in understanding a situation, especially something as complicated as the human brain, which is where autism, is located. Autism is the way that a brain is wired. It's the way that a brain and nervous system are connected to each other and the way that the nervous system interacts with the world around it. My cat is just causing some trouble, so I just have to get him settled so that I can make sure he's not gonna... Are you gonna just chill? Or
This isn't just any cat, by the way. This cat has been immortalized on fridge magnets around the globe, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, another thing about autism is a trait of being autistic is when you like something, just going ahead and letting yourself like it. And one of the things I really like is cats, and my cat is the best cat, as any cat owner knows. Your cat is the best cat. That's just science. That's how that works. I definitely also love making buttons. Again, thanks to advocacy. But I got a button maker for as a graduation present. And so I have definitely made buttons and magnets of my cat and sent them all over the world, actually. Not even just all over Canada. So...
we have one on my fridge. I caught my daughter playing with it the other day. I'm like, no, that's Fitzy. Go stop. He's got a cab along the bottom, but you talked about accommodations, right? And I think right now, when we think of dealing with autistic people, I say it because I feel like that's how people look at it, not because they're thinking of accommodations, but what they're using right now is a lot of ABA therapy, right? If you're in the NDP, you're getting talking points how important this therapy is, and it's a large basis of our funding model. Is that how we should be accommodating? Are these the kind of... I know your answer, obviously, but what's up with that? I mean, why is it so focused on that and not actually accommodations?
Yeah, this is... an excellent question. And, I think it's actually also a good point to put the question in, because it really is a fundamental part of how people misunderstand autism and autistic people. A lot of people will see me doing advocacy. They'll see me on, the last few years. The only reason I've been able to be so successful is the last few years we've all been doing things remotely, and so I've been able to do things from my own house. And that's where most of my accommodations are, in my house. When I have to leave my house and I have to, pack the accommodations I can take to go, normally I end up not being able to do as much stuff. And not being able to, you say at the beginning, I do a lot. I do much less when I have to do it without all of my accommodations. The reason that all of these accommodations are so helpful to me, now I've got things like STEM toys, which are just little, I've got, for example, a little 3D printed worm that kind of clicks as you wiggle it along. And this is something that I can hold in my hands while I'm having a serious political meeting, and I can feel the way that this it's a little bit of a stripey kind of plastic. If you've ever held on to like a 3D printed thing before, there's like a grain to it. And so I can feel that grain, and I can feel the way that the different interlocking parts of this thing are moving, and I can process that, and I can hear this distinct little clicky noise that it makes. And I can do all of that while I'm in a meeting so that my sensory system, which needs a serious amount of input at all times, is regulated. And that means I can actually process what that politician's saying, and then I can respond to them with the information that is there in my brain ready to respond to. Now, if I'm sitting in a meeting room and there's flickering lights, which are giving me a crazy headache, and my eyes hurt, and everything's way too bright in there, and it's actually kind of cold, and I'm sitting on this chair that is just, I cannot sit comfortably in, and because of professionalism, I can't pull my feet up on the chair, and I can't cross my legs, so I can't have that sensory input either, and I can't be fidgeting with something, and I can't have anything in my hands, and I have to be looking at this person's face in front of me, and I have to be monitoring my own facial expression, and I have to be doing all of these things. I don't have the energy left to listen to what they're saying. I don't have the energy left to come up with something to respond with, because my brain is too busy processing all of this sensory information with absolutely no regulating tools. And the reason that I explain it this way is because I could be explaining a political meeting that I took part in as part of a riding executive, or I could be explaining math class when I was 8. And they're both the exact same. Exactly the same. Autistic people are human beings. When we grow, we actually have mostly the same needs. And we actually go through the world as unique individuals. And that means problems that we have as kids are going to persist as adults. Now, a lot of people's solution, like you say, to the problem, a lot of people's solution to having to deal with autistic kids is, right now, behavioral intervention. And so this means that when a child is unable to sit still in the lights without playing with anything, and pay attention and look in their teacher's eyeballs, they are having bad behavior. They are having problematic behavior. And so they are referred to behavioral intervention to change their external behavior. Now, some of this behavioral intervention starts with like a behavioral assessment, where they try to pin the cause down on a narrow little list, and then they try to change the behavior. And so they show the kid the behavior they want to see, and then they tell the kid it's their turn. And if the kid does the behavior,
Sit
then,
still, right?
Sit still, look at me in the eyes, talk out loud, say this exact word back to me, point to this thing, whatever else, put this thing on that's uncomfortable for you, whatever it is, interrupt what you're doing to wave at this stranger, whatever it is. And these are all the more benign ones, to be honest. There are much worse. And then if the kid does it, then they get a lot of praise and positive feedback, and a lot of the time like stickers or candies, or they get to play with their favorite toy, or they get to have their comfort item or whatever else. And then if they do it wrong, then they get told to do it again. Positively, with a big smile, they get told to do it again.
Why is that bad, Lulu? A lot of parents would hear that and go, I do a form of that kind of every day,
Absolutely.
I got my kid inside with an M&M yesterday.
So the problem is, there is a reason that autistic children need accommodations. Autistic people are wired differently. Our bodies and brains react to the world around us differently than non-autistic people. Behavior interventions goals are based on non-autistic people. These are goals that are based on what non-autistic people are expected to and normally able to do without thinking, even. Things like making eye contact, for example. But for an autistic kid, something like sitting still without playing with something or making eye contact with somebody is painful. Now, here's the other thing. Another misconception is that autistic kids reacting to sensory stuff is because they don't like it. This is phrasing that's used, or that they're scared of it. People will say, oh, my child is scared of the vacuum cleaner because she covers her ears every time I turn it on. And that's not fear. Maybe that becomes fear of sensory pain, but sensory pain is not dislike. It's not fear. When you're overloaded in one of your senses, it feels as though you are going to burst. When I have to go outside into a bright sunny day with no sunglasses on, it's not that I'm kind of uncomfortable. It's that I'm in pain. It hurts. And what happens when we reduce that to behavior, when we say, oh no, well, the external behavior, oh, she screams and hides when we take her outside in the sunshine. We have to teach her to stand still in the sunshine. We have to teach her to stand here like the other kids are standing. So we're gonna enforce her until she does that, until she just stands here like the other kids are standing. And then you've got a little kid who's in pain and who's not telling you she's in pain because she doesn't know how to describe that, and who's not able to go anywhere because they've prevented her from going anywhere and hiding, and she's not able to do anything to escape the sensory pain, and she's also not allowed to acknowledge that sensory pain out loud. I don't know who might believe that sensory pain is going to disappear because of that, because what actually happens is it builds up inside of that person. And autistic people have so much sensory pain and emotional overwhelm and informational overwhelm and change overwhelm going on inside of our brains and bodies at all times, that what inevitably happens is the dam bursts and we have serious distress because of that, because we are completely overloaded. And again, people want to treat that behaviorally. People want to say that an autistic child who has been stressed and overwhelmed all day by the sensory hell that is our public school system has been absolutely decimated by the lights and the screaming of the other kids and having to look up from the work that they just want to be doing all day long, and then
getting
another
in trouble
kid
for fidgeting.
Getting in trouble for fidgeting, having to try and hold yourself still, and then they get home. Of course they're going to cry. Of course they're going to need to release that pent-up energy because we pushed them down all day long. And then we expected them not to come back up into their human form. These are people. Children are people. And it really seems like folks forget that, these behavior folks. Because children are not a series of behaviors. They're human beings. And that's not acknowledged in behavioral approaches. It's really not. And, you know, behavioral conditioning has absolutely a history, you know, and they talk about the evidence behind behavioral conditioning, and yeah, let's draw it to its root, which is, you know, conversion therapy, the root of behavioral analysis. Lovis and his team was also foundational in queer conversion therapy, because that was a behavior they didn't like. And just the same way that queer conversion therapy, I shouldn't even call that therapy, but queer conversion practices attempt to change a queer person's behaviors so they won't be queer anymore, and attempt to convince a person through behaviorally controlling them that they're not queer anymore. You know, we've also got autistic conversion practices, ABA, and behavioral conditioning and behavioral intervention. And these are practices that aim to make autistic people act like we're not autistic. And that doesn't just mean they're trying to make us make eye contact. It means they're trying to make us act as though we are not experiencing the world the way that we are. When you're in sensory overload, you can act like you're not in sensory overload. And that doesn't change for a second the fact that that's what you are experiencing. And after a while, that adds up. Again, there are really horrifying studies showing that autistic people are considerably more likely to die young, not just by things like random, unexplained heart conditions, but also one of our highest killers is suicide. And when we've asked autistic people in research, why are so many of you suicidal? What autistic people have answered with is, I am expected to act like somebody else all the time. I can't do it. I'm burnt out. I'm tired. I don't want to live here if I have to act like someone else. And we know this. Research has turned this up countless times.
Is this what we call masking, Lulu?
It is. It is. This is commonly called masking. In autistic communities, the act of having to cover yourself up and present a version of yourself that isn't autistic, that isn't quite you, that isn't authentic. And a lot of people look at this and they say, hey, I have to do that too for work, or I have to do that when I'm around people that don't like me, or whatever else. And the reason that I didn't open by just trying to explain it as covering yourself up is because it's an attempt to make us change from the outside in. And society, the education systems, psychology, these institutions have tried really hard to make autistic people not autistic anymore from the outside in. The same worldwide institution that certified behavioral specialists in Ontario, that same international institution also certifies the behavior analysts at the Judge Rodenberg Center in the States who are currently administering electric shocks to autistic children, mostly Black and brown children, who were never given the chance to develop any accommodations or any other type of life, and instead are in an institution getting electric shocked for their behavior because that institution can't see past behavior. And this is why anyone who's offering